Welcome back. In this video, we're going to capture the mouse event using jQuery and use that mouse click to actually draw a square on a canvas the way that a drawing program would work. We'll start out with a blank HTML5 document like the one that's shown here, and I'm going to add two div tags. The first one is for the output, where we'll show the mouse coordinates of the click event. The second one is going to be the canvas that's being drawn upon. For those of you who are interested, there's some CSS included with these examples that draws the canvas and then centers it on the screen. It gives it a grayish background and a border. You can see more in the basic page CSS file. Let's just take a look at what that canvas looks like. Okay, so now what we want to do is rig up the behavior so that when the area inside this canvas is clicked anywhere inside of the border, that it'll capture that click event. To do so, we'll use an ID selector on the canvas tag, and we'll simply capture the click event. We use a function that takes an argument of e, where e is going to be used to derive the mouse coordinates. That argument e can be called anything that we want. We could call it e or args or b or c or almost anything, as long as it's not a reserved keyword in JavaScript. To get those coordinates, we'll assign them values of x and y. Let's explain a little bit about what that means by looking at the canvas. For those of you who are familiar with a two-dimensional coordinate system, x generally refers to the distance from the left border, and y refers to the distance from the top of the page. Since we're interested in drawing only inside of the canvas that's shown here, there's an easy way to get those coordinates. For x, we'll simply create a variable called x and assign it a value of page x. What that does is it gives the position on the page where the mouse is when it's clicked. Keep in mind that since we're binding to the click event on the canvas, this is only going to be fired when the mouse is inside of this canvas border and it's clicked. We can assign y a similar value of phy. Pretty simple so far. Let's just output the results to the output tag, which shows up in the upper left-hand corner. We'll use the HTML function, and recall that x tells us the distance from the left of the page, and y shows us the distance from the top of the page. Let's take a look. Okay, let's click here, close to the upper left-hand corner. As expected, the x and y values are pretty small. Now, let's try a big x value and around the same y value. Yep, that looks about right too. If we click down here, we'll expect the opposite. A small x value and a big y value. Okay, looks good so far. If we click outside of the box in this white area, nothing happens, which is what we expected. We only want the clicks to happen inside of this box. And they do. Next, we want to rig this up to draw a square. If you've ever used a drawing program, a square is usually drawn by clicking once to indicate where the upper left border of the square is, and then dragging the mouse down and clicking a second time to indicate where the lower right corner would go. As a result, we'll need to modify our jQuery code in order for it to be able to capture two different mouse clicks and keep track of where we are in the process. For simplicity's sake, let's create 4 more coordinates. 2 for the first mouse click where it starts. We've given those a value of start x and start y, and then 2 more for the finishing mouse click to complete the drawing of the square. There, those are called end x and end y. They've all been initialized to values of 0. Now, once the click has occurred, we'll need to figure out whether it's the first click to start drawing the square or the second click to finish drawing the square. We can use a simple if statement to determine if it's the first click. We know that if start x equals 0 and start y also equals 0, that it must be the first click. We'll add some more code later to zero out these values again after the second click has occurred. If it's the first click, let's capture the x coordinate in start x and start y so that we can begin drawing the square with those. There, we've handled the first click. Now let's move on and handle the second and final click. We'll put an else statement here, and this time we'll use end x and end y to capture the coordinates. There, now we've got all 4 coordinates. We're ready to draw the square. Let's go back to the canvas for a minute in order to explain something that we'll need to solve the final piece of this puzzle. We're going to use a div tag to draw a square. There are 4 pieces of information we need in order to draw a square that's in the right place and has the right dimensions. Those 4 pieces of information are 1. The x-coordinate of where the square should begin being drawn. 2. The y-coordinate of where the square should begin being drawn. 3. The width of the square, or rectangle if it's not 2 equal sides. And finally, the height of the square, or rectangle. Let's tackle these one at a time. The x-coordinate should be pretty easy. However, remember that a user might decide to create a square by clicking, say, down here first, and then dragging their mouse up to the further left or in some other direction to make the square. So they're not going to always enter the furthest point to the left first. Thus, we'll need to make the x-coordinate of the square smaller of the 2 values. We'll use a ternary operator to give us the smaller value of these 2. There. Whichever value is smallest will go into the x-coordinate. We'll do the same thing for the y-coordinate. Okay, we've solved half the puzzle. We've got the x and y coordinate where we want to begin drawing the square. We still need to figure out the width and height of the square. Let's start with the width. We know that the width is just the distance between the start and end of the 2 x coordinates. Since we want this value to be positive, we use the ternary operator again. So if the starting point is closer to the left of the page than the ending point, we can make the width simply end minus start. Otherwise, we simply reverse these 2. We can do the same thing for the height of the rectangle, but with the y-coordinates. There. We have all the information we need to draw a rectangular div now. Let's do that. To create a new div tag, we'll call the jQuery function here and just pass it an empty div tag. Now we can stack properties on top of this div tag that we've just created. Let's start with the x-coordinate. We'll use CSS and left and give that a value of x-coordinate. The y-coordinate, we'll use top. This is the offset from the top of the page. Give it y-coordinate. For the width, we can use the width function in jQuery and pass it this width value we calculated up here. Same with height. We'll just pass in the value from up here. Finally, we'll need to make sure that the position of this rectangle we're drawing is fixed. using the page's absolute grid system. It also might be nice to give it a color. Make the background color blue. Give it a border too. Make the border solid and a dark gray color. Now we can add this div tag we've created to the canvas. We'll use the append function for that. Since we want to be able to draw more rectangles, we'll zero out start X and start Y. This will ensure that when the user clicks on the canvas again, it starts to draw a new rectangle and captures the coordinates of the rectangle up here on line 26. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, we'll click once here, and we saw that that click was recorded. We'll end the rectangle down here. There. Let's draw another one here. And a third one right up here. We can make these as big or small as we like. It won't let us draw outside of the canvas, which is handy. The shapes can overlap as well. Obviously, this is a very rudimentary paint program. But nonetheless, we were able to create it with just a few lines of jQuery and JavaScript.